Hello, my name is Jennifer Schram, and this is my presentation on poverty at Starbucks as a partner. I created this workshop as if I was presenting it to one of my peers or to a group of my peers, um, which is something that I probably actually might do with my district team. So, okay, here we go. Okay, hello. Thank you for joining me today as we're going to talk through what it might be like to work at Starbucks as a partner here if you're in poverty. My name is Jennifer Schram, which you already know, and we're going to get started. So, throughout this course, we're going to be learning about universal design and other ways to ensure that workplace environments are inclusive. So we're going to be going through the purpose of this workshop, which is to better help understand what living in poverty might look like um, as a partner, which is a situation that's true for many partners in our stores. And there are ways that we can be better to support them, to be able to help their experience as their partners with us. The goal of the workshop is to understand the presence of poverty in our area and how that is going to affect our teams, to learn where Starbucks stands in the journey already with partners who have poverty, and then to see what we could do better at Starbucks, and then what you specifically as a leader can do to help support your partners in poverty at this time. Okay, so next we're going to go through and talk about what poverty actually is. So many factors are included to determine whether or not a person or a family is considered to be in poverty. What many people think of when they think of poverty is just the poorest of the poor, people who are unhomed or people who are not able to afford basic utilities or needs like water and food, which could all be true, but there are many people living in poverty that are able to scrape by with the bare minimum. So they might have somewhere to live, they may be able um, to eat or at least appear to be eating, and you may not be aware that your partner is in poverty. But even though that's true, sometimes they can struggle. People in poverty can struggle to attain or hold down jobs. And there's plenty of things that keep them in struggle. In our area of Southeast Michigan, let me see. Oops, I've accidentally minimized myself here. In our area of Southeast Michigan, we have I believe it was 20%. Let's see. There we go. Okay, there we go. So many factors are included, which we already talked about. In Southeast Michigan, about 442,086 families fall below the poverty line, and that was in 2001. In Macomb County, which is where we are, that's about 50% of an increase over the last 10 years. So we have had a 50% increase in the number of people that fall below the poverty line in the last 10 years. It's intensified when you look into the suburbs, so that it isn't just Detroit. Well, I guess Macomb County doesn't technically hold Detroit, but it isn't just the lower parts right outside of Detroit, but all of the suburbs have increased their poverty percentage, and the suburbs specifically have increased 94.5% over the past 10 years in people falling below the poverty line. Because lower income families tend to have more children, the number of children in poverty is even higher. The percentage of the population has increased for the children even more. Um, because of that information, we can infer that for a store in Macomb County that has 20 partners, a minimum of 2 to 3 of them are most likely living below the poverty line or could be living below the poverty line. If we were in Wayne County, so all of our Grosse Pointe stores or any of the stores in that area down there, it's more likely to be 7 out of 20, which is a really high percentage. So being aware of this allows us to be able to take into account the needs that our partners might have, um, because they might be below the poverty line. So, we're going to talk through some things that we're doing really well and so where we have some opportunities. So when learning about the different ways an employer can help reduce poverty, I was really surprised to see how many of the things that already show up at Starbucks. And the steps outlined in Reducing Poverty Toolkit, which is put together by the Business for Social Responsibility and Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, Starbucks is achieving most, if not all, of the things that are outlined. We're going to talk through them all, but well, not all, but quite a few of them. Um, so things like having paid training, giving really clear role clarity, creating spaces for meaningful work, offering full-time employment, which we do at 20 hours a week here at Starbucks, creating flexible scheduling so partners can have schedules around whatever else is happening in their life, like having children or childcare, and then financial education. So we provide financial education for partners and just so many of the things that were listed, excuse me, in that toolkit are present at Starbucks. So that was really fantastic. Um, where we do have room to improve are the areas of transportation, access to laundry, or the ability um, to access clean clothes, basically. And then ensuring that we have wraparound care for our partners. That was one of the last steps that was included in the toolkit, but that's creating scaffolding to make sure that partners have everything that they need, from mental well-being to home to just to actual health care and being able to see those wraparound services, which is something that schools will try to do too, and just trying to lean into that like whole person care that we at Starbucks are their work, but how do you sort of be aware of the whole person and all of their needs and trying to figure out how we fit into that. And trying to create ways to have that wraparound care. To be honest, I couldn't find examples of this already happening, so I'm not sure exactly what that looks like in the workplace, but figuring out how we could try to um, be really innovative and to just challenge the status quo in this way and try to go out there and reimagine what's possible, I think is a really great next step for us. Okay, so one of the things that we talked through in this class was universal design. And so I went through a couple of the ways that universal design can show up for partners in poverty working at Starbucks and what we as managers or the company can do to try to help with the universal design of our systems and processes. So universal design requires us to take into account all possible ways of being. So when considering the component of poverty in the barista role, there are two pieces of universal design that I feel are really relevant. Equitable use, which refers to all people being able to participate in something without stigma or additional effort. And then also tolerance for error, which is just the ability to make mistakes and still survive, still be able to make a mistake and then still be able to be present. So, for equitable use, I just shared being aware of privilege. So recognizing that parents and caregivers, specifically ones that are already below the poverty line or the Alice threshold, which is the gap sort of between poverty and then cost of living. So a lot of people might be over the poverty line, but still not necessarily able to afford living in Michigan, which is I think the Alice threshold right now is $70,000 per household, something like that. So that whole really big gap of from the poverty line to the Alice threshold of where you're actually able to afford to live here, that gap also sort of could use the same support structure, even if you're not in poverty. So, being aware of that privilege. So, being aware of privileges that people who do not have children or not caregivers have of being able to be a little bit more flexible. So, recognizing the struggles that those groups might have if they're a parent or if they're a caregiver and the additional complexity that goes into their lives because of that and being able to figure out how we can support them differently in those scenarios. I'm also being aware of the fact that some people don't have a car or don't have a vehicle, or are sharing a car with somebody else, and how that can adjust or change their schedule, their abilities to be here sometimes on time if they're not able to plan because or of things that are outside of their control, like bus schedules or things like that. If things are running behind or things go wrong, those things can come up when people don't have the privilege of having their own vehicle. which in Michigan is really important because we don't have very good public transportation. And then a second equitable use topic that we can work through is removing cost barriers. So with our new dress code, just recognizing, okay, we did offer 2 shirts, but how can what other ways could we help potentially to reduce the cost of having to have that certain type of clothing if you don't already have it. One of the things that I found out that happens actually in Canada is that in Canada they launder all the aprons. So when you're working, when you come into work, you grab a clean, brand new, shiny apron off the rack, and when you leave at the end of the day, you put it in the dirty apron bin, just like you would the towels. And that just reduces that extra cost of having to launder and clean your own aprons, especially if you don't have the access to a washing machine, which I personally have multiple partners in my store that don't have access to washing machines in their house. They have to either go to the laundromat or sometimes they'll go to another partner's house to wash clothes um, if necessary. So that's a real problem that many of our partners face. And then also the early AM travel costs. So again, if you don't have a car and you're having to ride share, or you're having to do something like that. A lot of our partners are coming to work at a time when there's not really any options. And even using Uber or something like that, the options are minimal and sometimes really expensive to be able to get to work on time. Tolerance for error. So I brought up flexible accountability. So advocating for rolling corrective action. So for partners who do have situations like this where they don't have a car, or they maybe are caregivers, and sometimes those things throw wrenches into the situation. That if we had some sort of rolling corrective action where maybe something happened 6 months ago, or that would maybe fall off. So if somebody was late because of something a couple times in a row because of a broken down car or because of childcare, that we would be able to have the flexibility of letting those things roll off if once we like if they were below a certain number. So obviously if we're already at a final written warning, those shouldn't just disappear. But if we had some sort of rolling corrective action for those more minor offenses, and then detailed verbal coaching. So clear, I mentioned that clear is kind here. And what I mean by that is that the more detailed explanation of what is needed, and figuring out and sort of perimortem, figuring out what could potentially go wrong to be able to make sure that in the future we're able to address those issues sort of ahead of time or before they come up, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit in a minute more. So that was my universal design application. And then how we can maybe design some solutions or allyship. So, store managers have a really important role in applying the learnings from Reducing Poverty Toolkit, like role clarity and schedule flexibility. Making sure that we build relationships with our team allows for open dialogue, which creates space for your partners to share their needs, making it more likely that you're going to be able to know if they need different support. So, when a partner misses the mark, or they're not able to do something we need them to do, creating space for sharing by asking a lot of questions during accountability conversations and making sure that there's no different support needed, like changing a partner availability or helping them find a solution for laundry. um, Partner networks. Well, let me just go through. So well, I'll do that. I'll go through these and then I'll go through the slide. So partner networks are another way that we can really help. So partner networks often lead the way in advocacy for many things, participating in relevant partner networks that include, and then including the learnings that we've had from our conversations with our partners creates the ability to have additional support in the future. So um, it just really can help us get some traction. But for the store manager, so making sure that when we're training store managers or even just doing your regular development as a store manager, knowing how to include those things that we were talking about from the reducing poverty through employment toolkit, the hiring and onboarding process, role clarity, those things are really important. Spending time and energy at those points to really make it clear what is expected, and also opening that door for that really clear communication. Ensuring space for open dialogue with partners, and then asking questions during accountability conversations are all ways that we can really hone into those pieces of the toolkit. And then policy advocacy. So again, joining the partner networks, using those tools to share back. So any surveys, partner perspectives, talking to our next level leader, is another example of that. Just using all the tools we have to share what we learn from our partners to be able to just inform future decisions. And then partner engagement. So getting to know our partners, encouraging them to join the partner networks, because their voices go farther, to be honest. You have more that when you are hearing it directly from the person instead of an advocate, sometimes it makes a bigger impact emotionally for people. Encouraging them to also participate in the surveys and partner perspectives, participating in hard conversations with them. So leaning into the courage value and really saying what's true, being clear, asking questions, being vulnerable, and having those hard conversations. Um, those are all ways that we can really not only help build solutions, but be an ally for our partners who might be struggling. Model behavior. So when I was investigating companies that have made an impact on poverty, the first article I pulled up had Starbucks listed as a great advocate or a place that was working to solve poverty around the world. And they were referencing things like cafe practices and fair trade certified, but mostly it was that they're teaching people to do how to do those things at the Starbucks support center. So those support centers, if you're not aware, do a lot of community work to help build those communities with financial security, helping them learn best practices for how to actually maintain their craft, building their farms, growing their coffee. They're really doing work with those communities, just getting in there and figuring out how to help whatever that community needs, which is sometimes literally doctor care. So if you haven't ever learned about that, going in and learning a little bit about that, really, it's just hopeful and encouraging to know the impact that we're making around the world. The other thing that I listed was that they're always uplifting women and other minority groups around the world as well. So we have many women or owned farms and communities that are really led by women in all around the world, around the coffee belt, that we have our support centers. And then the other organization that showed up was Trader Joe's in the actual like US, because they do things that are trying to help reduce poverty. And one of the big things that I thought was really cool was that they created this store called the Daily Table where they're creating affordable food by taking food that was going to be wasted and then selling it like just so like super discounted. I forget the phrase that they used, but basically being able to take that good food and redistributing it to the communities in need. Okay, so the key takeaways at Starbucks, our partner promise is to be a bridge to a better future. Um, but what I'm hoping that you're taking away from this presentation is that poverty is present in all of our stores, and that we should be aware of that, need to be aware of that. That Starbucks does a lot to help, but there's more things that we can do. Being a bridge to a better future, it calls us to create opportunities for our partners, but also not only for them to learn and grow and become better humans, but also to for us personally to create space for the people who are in need of a better future. So trying to figure out how can we make an impact and recognizing that that starts at the recruiting and hiring stage and that all of the ways that we're advocating for specific partner situations. So using our first sip and your role conversation to be really clear about expectations. Again, clear as kind. Learning our partners' individual situations and accommodation needs, getting to know those people and creating that open space for dialogue. And then again, advocating for any recurring issues or struggles, even a single partner's experience might warrant sharing if there's any chance it could be repeated. So recognizing that no one is an island, everybody's situations are relevant and that if it's happened to one person, it's most likely going to happen again. So how can we figure out what we can do to better support? Additional resources, I included the Reducing Poverty Through Employment Toolkit, and then evidence. The next one is just examples of what can be done to eradicate poverty, which isn't necessarily something that we can do specifically, but it's what we can advocate for in the larger world. And then the last resource that I put up here was our partners, because I really do believe that each individual person and their individual needs can inform this work more than anything else. Um, I just want to again mention so many of the things that were in this toolkit, Starbucks is already doing. Front-loaded training on corporate norms and expectations, providing role clarity, making work meaningful, but that we do have some work to do. So helping manage transportation, offering relevant wraparound services, those are things that we can try to figure out how to do to challenge the status quo. And then trying to make sure that we're figuring out how to be an advocate outside of the store, learning the different things that can be done to reduce poverty. And then the last source again is our partners. So getting to know our partners and their lives and where they may struggle or where it might be hard for them, is that's going to make us the best advocate. So, thank you very much for your time. This is, whoops, uh-oh, start of the video. These are my resources, and yeah, that's all I have today. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.